The sun's coming up, the drinks are hot, and now it's time for our first cup. Today, democratic domestic violence. As a forewarning, this episode will deal with heady topics. Your discretion is advised. The first time that my ex, Clea, took a knife to her wrists over the kitchen sink in the apartment that we shared, she didn't draw blood. The second time she did that, she did draw blood. Just remember seeing her take the knife down and seeing just a little bit of red pop up on her wrist. I rushed over there and I took her left arm, the one that she had been cutting into, and put it above her heart while I shook the steak knife out of her right hand. It was terrifying. And I can remember while I was looking at the wound on her left hand, you know, she's got tears on her face. Like I had this simultaneously, I was thankful she hadn't hit anything, it looked like, any of her vasculature, really. But I also had this terrified sense of what happens when she does. You know, this woman was 5'7", like 115, 120 pounds. Very small. I was still this, you know, north of 6 feet, north of 220 pounds. But I felt terror. Well, here was this person that I cared about very deeply. Harming herself. Now, I would later learn that despite all of the complex terror that I was feeling, that's not what she was feeling. She wanted me to feel that, right? Because ultimately, she wanted our relationship to continue. To be honest, it wasn't really a great relationship, but she knew that she could use my integrity and my cultural biases against me, right? She knew I was from a culture that said, you stick with your woman and you just get through it. You just put the problems of the relationship on your back and you just blaze on forward. She got what she wanted for a time. The relationship stayed together, and at least for a while, it stayed together. Ultimately, we broke up and I helped her move out of what would become my apartment, move out of my life, but that night over the kitchen sink never really left my mind until years after the fact. And thinking about all of this and seeing how it parallels another situation here, years after that, really got me thinking. I want to make sure that I get this right, so I'm going to quote directly from the source, and then I'll tell you what it is. I think at the end of the day, we had to make people, we had to raise people's concern about the threat level of a Trump second term. I think if you look at our internal data, I can speak to this. We did a lot of that. Sorry, it's really hard to read off of a small-ass watch screen. Long story short, that's David Plouffe on the Pod Save America podcast from November 24th or 26th when they were talking about the Harris campaign and doing a post-mortem. And what Plouffe is saying there is we needed to make our electorate scared of what would happen if they didn't stick with us. Sound familiar? I've already mentioned earlier this year about feeling like there wasn't enough outreach to people like me at the national level from the party that I've been a part of for 16 years at this point. You know, I came in to the Democratic Party when I came to California, right, which was an election year. It was 2008. You know, registered as a Democrat after being an independent in Arizona for a long time. And sitting here and realizing that in those 16 years, I've spent more than half of them being told, stick with us or terrible things are going to happen. More than half of that time. I came in because of hope, right? I came in because of a relatively populist feeling message of a future that embodied an American dream that I could believe in, and soon after it turned into be afraid. It turned from hope to fear. And when I think about that night with my ex and the knife, I never expected to see echoes of it in my party affiliation. And I'll be real, it feels pretty disgusting to make that realization. Like I was pissed off when I was listening to that Pod Save America podcast. You know, I've known for a while. I've known for a while that that's been the tactic, the fear-based kind of politics. But only after hearing that podcast and hearing multiple Democratic strategists from the Harris campaign say, we wanted to make people afraid, we did it, but we just didn't do it enough. Yeah, that's it. That's it for me. I was in that relationship with my abusive ex for a few years. She got away with threatening to harm herself, threatening a whole bunch of things, threatening all sorts of shit that I don't need to get into right now. And it took me a while, but I left that relationship because it was abusive. It wasn't based on trust, and it was, worst of all, abusing my sense of integrity and morality and doing the right thing. It was using that against me for its own ends. She was in the relationship. And now I see the National Democratic Party doing the same thing. I left the first relationship, and before the end of this year, I will be leaving the second as well. Because fundamentally, there's no excuse for abuse at home, nor is there any excuse for democratic domestic violence. Please remember that no matter what you've heard or what I've said, death comes for us all, and a closed mouth never gets fed. Take care of yourselves. We'll speak again soon.